Hi, it's Kiffin Bates here, and today I thought I'd talk a bit about the basics of Bitcoin keys or Bitcoin addresses. And if you're into programming and looking to get into understanding a bit of what goes on with Bitcoin, then addresses is a very good place to start because it's pretty well documented and it's actually not that hard to get your head around. So in Bitcoin, in order to be able to own some Bitcoin, you need to have a Bitcoin address to which you control the private key. And the digital signing algorithm that Nakamoto chose for Bitcoin is ECDSA, or Elliptic Curve Digital Signing Algorithm, and he picked a particular curve, and ECDSA uses 256-bit private keys. So you create a random number between 0 and about 2 to the power of 256. It's actually slightly less than that. You can go and look up the exact number. I don't remember it off the top of my head. And then you put it through the ECDSA public key generating algorithm, which is freely available in OpenSSL, and you get out either a 65-byte public key or a 33-byte public key, depending on whether you go for compressed or uncompressed. Now, I don't know why anybody would go for uncompressed. It's just bigger, and the compressed one actually contains exactly the same information as the uncompressed one. It just happens to use a fact, namely that the elliptic curve is symmetric. So you don't need to specify the X and Y point on the curve that your public key is. You just need to say what it is on the X axis and whether it's up or down, i.e. positive or negative. So that then gives you your 33 bytes. Now, what Nakamoto then did was he decided that it would probably be a bad idea to reveal your public ECDSA key. Being a bit paranoid, he thought, what if ECDSA is cracked? Then there'll be a problem. So what he did was he came up with the Bitcoin address, which is basically taking a RIPE-MD hash of your public key, and then you take 2 times SHA-256 hash. He seems to have a thing for doing SHA-256 hashes twice, I don't know why. Then there's a checksum added to the end. There's a bit put on the front to say whether this is a key for the public network or whether it's for the test network. And then he base 58 encoded it. Now, some of you may be familiar with base 64 encoding. That's a way of taking bytes and representing them using ASCII characters. And base 58 is the same as base 64, but it removes a couple of the characters that could be easily confused, like 0 and O and things like that. So then you end up with one of those familiar Bitcoin address strings. If it's on the mainnet, it'll typically start with a 1. I'm talking about the early type addresses. There are more advancements in the way that Bitcoin addresses work. So you have like addresses for keys that are multi-sign, and there are a few other ones. Again, I don't have time to really talk about them in a short video. But at the end, you come out with this string of characters that looks like a sort of long line of gibberish, but at least you can scan it with your eyes and write it down and type it in on your keyboard. And because of the checksum, if you make a character error, you'll probably get an alert that it's not a valid Bitcoin address. But you should always, of course, be very, very careful when entering these addresses, just as you should be careful when entering credit card numbers or bank account numbers if you're transferring money in the traditional banking system. So there you go, that's the basics of how a Bitcoin public address is made. And actually, one of the interesting things about the fact that the public key is hashed with RIPE-MD, there's actually an information loss there. So I think it's around about, well, I think basically every Bitcoin address actually has a close to 100 possible ECDSA keys that could be used to control it. However, that's such a small decrease in the pool of available addresses and available private keys that in practice it has very little impact on the security of the system, because 2 to the power of 256 is a very, very big number. Dividing it by 100 is not going to give you a significant loss of security. I can give an example where fairly recently it came out that a lot of the certificate authority companies had accidentally been issuing certificates where one of the one of the bytes had been set to 0 at the end, thereby reducing the actual space that needed to be brute force searched in order to crack a digital certificate. It was an oversight, and as a result it sort of raised alarms about how thorough they were with their technical competency, but in practice it didn't really impact the security of the system very much, because again, searching over 2 to the power of 255 rather than 2 to the power of 256 addresses is not a significant drop in the amount of work that needs to be done. Anyway, there's some stuff on Bitcoin addresses. Hope you found it interesting, and see you in the next video soon. Bye for now.